There exists within every human heart a battlefield where two voices compete for supremacy. One voice roars with the thunder of anxiety, demanding immediate attention, flooding your mind with worst-case scenarios and paralyzing possibilities. The other voice speaks in whispers so gentle they can barely be heard above the chaos of daily life, offering peace that defies understanding and hope that transcends circumstances. The first voice is fear, the second is faith. And the choice you make between them, moment by moment, day after day, is quietly determining the trajectory of your entire existence. Most people live their lives believing they are victims of their emotions, slaves to their circumstances, powerless against the tidal waves of worry that crash over them without warning. They have been deceived into thinking that fear is simply part of the human condition, an unavoidable companion that must be endured rather than conquered. But what if I told you that this battle between fear and faith is not just a philosophical concept or a nice religious idea? What if I told you that it is the most practical, life-determining reality you will ever face, and that understanding how to navigate it will revolutionize everything about how you experience your days? Today, we are going to expose the anatomy of this ancient struggle. We will dissect how fear operates in your mind, uncover the sophisticated strategies it uses to maintain control over your thoughts and actions. We will explore how faith functions as a completely different operating system for life, one that transforms not just your internal experience, but your external reality. We will examine the daily disciplines that shift the balance of power from fear to faith, and we will envision what your life looks like when faith becomes your default response to every challenge, every uncertainty, every moment of potential. This is not a message about positive thinking or emotional management. This is warfare instruction for the battle that determines whether you live as a prisoner or as a free person. Before we dive deeper, if something in your spirit is already recognizing the truth of what we are exploring, if you sense that this is exactly the understanding you have been searching for, I want you to do something that helps me tremendously. Hit the like button on this video right now. That simple action tells me that this message is resonating and that I should continue bringing you content like this. And then, most importantly, subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell. Why? Because what we are about to uncover in the next several minutes will completely transform how you understand the spiritual dynamics operating in your daily life. And you need to be here for the upcoming videos where we will go even deeper into these life-changing truths. Do it now. It takes just 2 seconds. And then we will continue. Let me begin by telling you what fear actually is, because most people fundamentally misunderstand its nature. Fear is not primarily an emotion. Fear is a voice. It is not simply a feeling that arises spontaneously from difficult circumstances. It is an active communicator that seeks to establish itself as your primary advisor, your chief counselor, your dominant perspective on reality. Fear speaks. It has messages. It offers interpretations of your circumstances. It provides analysis of your future possibilities. It presents itself as wisdom, as realism, as necessary preparation for an uncertain world. But here is what fear never tells you about itself. Fear is a liar, not just occasionally mistaken or overly cautious. Fear is a systematic deceiver whose primary function is to keep you small, paralyzed, and disconnected from the life you were created to live. Fear whispers that you are not capable. Fear suggests that the worst outcome is the most likely outcome. Fear convinces you that safety lies in avoiding risk, that security comes from controlling every variable, that peace is found in never venturing beyond what you can predict and manage. Listen carefully to how fear operates in your mind. Fear takes a single possibility, usually the most negative one available, and presents it to you as an inevitable reality. Your mind begins to rehearse disaster scenarios. You find yourself mentally preparing for conversations that may never happen, defending against criticisms that have not been spoken, solving problems that exist only in your imagination. Fear hijacks your mental energy and redirects it toward fictional futures filled with fictional problems requiring fictional solutions. Fear is also a master of timing. It strikes when you are tired, when your defenses are low, when you are facing important decisions or significant transitions. Fear knows that in moments of vulnerability, you are most susceptible to its suggestions. It floods your consciousness with urgent concerns that demand immediate attention, creating a sense of crisis that drowns out the quieter voice of wisdom and peace. But perhaps, most insidiously, fear disguises itself as virtue. It presents itself as responsibility, as caring about your family, as being prepared and realistic about life's challenges. Fear makes you believe that constant worry is the price of being a loving parent, a responsible employee, a prepared person. It convinces you that if you are not anxious about something, you must not care enough about it. The tragic result of fear's dominion in your life is not just internal turmoil. Fear shapes your decisions. Fear determines your relationships. Fear limits your career choices, your ministry opportunities, your willingness to love deeply and risk greatly. Fear makes you smaller than you were designed to be, keeps you living far below the level of impact and influence and joy that God intended for your life. Fear also breeds more fear. Each time you allow fear to make a decision for you, you strengthen its voice in your life. Each time you avoid a challenging conversation because fear tells you it will go badly. Each time you refuse an opportunity because fear warns you about potential failure. Each time you hold back love because fear threatens you with possible rejection, you are essentially training fear to become stronger and faith to become weaker. But fear does not work alone. It has allies, reinforcements that amplify its message and multiply its power in your life. Fear partners with pride, which refuses to acknowledge weakness or ask for help. Fear collaborates with control, which demands certainty and predictability in an uncertain world. Fear joins forces with comparison, which measures your life against others and always finds you lacking. Fear teams up with perfectionism, which paralyzes you with the demand that everything must be flawless before you can move forward. Together, these forces create what we might call a stronghold of limitation in your mind. They establish patterns of thinking and responding that become so automatic you barely notice them anymore. You simply accept that anxiety is your normal state, that worry is your constant companion, that stress is the inevitable result of caring about anything important. Fear also has a sophisticated understanding of your personal vulnerabilities. It knows your history of disappointment, your past failures, your deepest insecurities. Fear customizes its attacks to your specific weak points. If you have been betrayed in relationships, fear will whisper warnings about trusting anyone new. If you have experienced financial difficulty, fear will magnify every economic concern into a catastrophic prediction. If you have failed at something significant, fear will use that memory to discourage you from attempting anything challenging again. The voice of fear is loud, urgent, persistent, and detailed. It provides elaborate scenarios, specific warnings, compelling arguments for why you should be afraid. Fear speaks with authority, as if it has perfect knowledge of future events and superior wisdom about how you should navigate your life. Fear presents itself as your protector, your guardian against potential harm, your wise counselor who sees dangers that you might otherwise miss. But here is the profound truth that changes everything. Fear's voice, no matter how loud and convincing it sounds, is not the only voice available to you. There is another voice, operating on a completely different frequency. offering an entirely different perspective on your life and circumstances. This is the voice of faith, and while fear screams, faith whispers. Faith does not compete with fear by shouting louder. Faith does not overcome fear through superior volume or more compelling arguments. Faith operates through a completely different system of communication. Faith speaks in whispers because faith knows that those who are truly listening, those who have trained their hearts to receive spiritual communication, can hear the quietest truth above the loudest lie. The voice of faith speaks differently than fear. Where fear offers predictions, faith offers promises. Where fear presents problems, faith reveals possibilities. Where fear focuses on what you lack, faith reminds you of what you carry. Where fear warns about what might go wrong, faith affirms what God can make right. But here is what makes faith so difficult to hear initially. Faith requires a different kind of listening than fear demands. Fear captures your attention through crisis and urgency. Fear forces itself into your awareness through anxiety and alarm. Faith invites you into a quieter space where spiritual communication becomes possible. Faith requires that you create silence, that you cultivate stillness, that you develop the capacity to receive communication that does not shout. Faith whispers truths like these. You are not alone in this situation. There are resources available to you that you cannot see with natural eyes. The same God who has brought you through every previous difficulty is present with you in this current challenge. Your past failures do not determine your future possibilities. The love that created you has not abandoned you in your time of need. There is a plan for your life that is larger than your current understanding and more beautiful than your current circumstances suggest. Faith speaks about your identity in ways that fear never could. Fear tells you what you are not. Faith reveals who you are. Fear emphasizes your weaknesses. Faith affirms your strengths. Fear reminds you of your mistakes. Faith declares your potential. Fear focuses on your limitations. Faith proclaims your possibilities. But faith does more than speak encouragement. Faith also provides practical guidance for how to live differently. Faith suggests that you take the next step even when you cannot see the entire path. Faith recommends that you trust the process even when you cannot control the outcome. Faith advises you to invest love even when you cannot guarantee return. Faith counsels you to pursue your calling even when you cannot predict success. Faith operates from a completely different set of assumptions about reality than fear does. Fear assumes that you are ultimately responsible for managing all the variables of your life, that your security depends on your ability to predict and control outcomes, that safety lies in avoiding all risks and preparing for all contingencies. Faith operates from the assumption that you are partnering with a God who is actively involved in your life, that your security rests in divine faithfulness rather than personal management, that true safety is found in alignment with God's purposes rather than avoidance of all challenges. This difference in assumptions leads to completely different responses to identical circumstances. When you face financial pressure, fear tells you to worry constantly about money, to make financial security your highest priority, to hoard resources and avoid any expenses that are not absolutely necessary. Faith, facing the same financial pressure, suggests that you steward your resources wisely while trusting God's provision, that you continue generous giving because God's economy operates differently than fear's economy, that you make decisions based on calling and purpose rather than only financial considerations. When you encounter relationship conflict, fear advises you to protect yourself at all costs, to avoid difficult conversations, to withdraw emotionally to prevent further hurt. Faith, dealing with the same relationship tension, guides you toward honest communication, toward forgiveness and reconciliation where possible, toward love that risks being hurt because love that holds back is not really love at all. When you face a major life decision, fear counsels you to choose the safest option, to avoid any choice that involves uncertainty or potential failure, to maintain the status quo because change always involves risk. Faith, evaluating the same decision, encourages you to seek God's direction through prayer and wise counsel, to consider not just safety, but calling, to move forward in obedience even when the path is not completely clear. If you have made it this far in our exploration, it is because your spirit is recognizing the truth of what we are uncovering. Do not let this message remain only in your mind. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already done so, because in the coming days I am going to share specific strategies for developing spiritual discernment that will help you distinguish between fear's voice and faith's voice in real-time situations. Hit the like button if this is helping you understand your internal battles differently, and share this video with someone you know who is struggling to break free from the prison of constant worry. Your subscription is not just a number to me. It represents another person who is choosing to walk in spiritual freedom rather than emotional bondage. Now let me show you how to practically strengthen faith's voice while weakening fear's influence in your daily life. This transformation does not happen through a single moment of decision, though decision is certainly involved. This change occurs through the development of spiritual disciplines that gradually retrain your mind to receive faith's communication more readily while becoming less susceptible to fear's deceptions. The first discipline is the practice of stillness. Fear thrives in the chaos of constant mental activity, in the endless stream of thoughts and concerns that dominate most people's consciousness. Faith requires space to be heard. This means creating regular periods of silence in your life, times when you deliberately quiet the noise of your mind and create capacity for spiritual communication. This is not merely relaxation or stress management. This is creating the internal environment where faith's voice can be distinguished from fear's chatter. Practically, this means beginning each day with a period of silence before you engage with the demands and concerns that will fill your hours. Even 10 minutes of quiet reflection, prayer, or meditation can establish faith's voice as the first influence on your mind, rather than allowing fear to set the tone for your entire day. This silence is not empty space. It is intentional listening for divine guidance, for peace that transcends circumstances, for perspective that sees beyond immediate concerns. The second discipline is the practice of gratitude. Fear focuses your attention on what is missing, what is threatening, what could go wrong. Gratitude deliberately redirects your attention toward what is present, what is good, what is working in your life. This is not denial of real problems or challenges. This is choosing to maintain perspective by acknowledging the full reality of your situation, including the positive elements that fear would have you ignore. Gratitude weakens fear's voice because fear depends on scarcity thinking. Fear convinces you that there is not enough time, not enough resources, not enough love, not enough opportunity for you to live well. Gratitude reveals abundance. Gratitude notices provision. Gratitude recognizes that even in difficult seasons, there are gifts present that fear cannot see. The practice of gratitude means actively looking for evidences of God's goodness in your daily experience. It means acknowledging answered prayers, recognizing unexpected helps, appreciating relationships and opportunities and simple pleasures that fear would dismiss as insignificant. This deliberate focus on blessing trains your mind to notice God's activity in your life, which strengthens your faith in God's continued provision and care. The third discipline is the study of God's faithfulness. Faith is not wishful thinking or positive attitude. Faith is confidence based on evidence. The evidence for faith is found in God's character and God's track record of faithfulness throughout history and in your personal experience. Fear wants you to forget this evidence, to focus only on current difficulties and future uncertainties. The study of God's faithfulness means regularly reminding yourself of how God has provided, protected, guided, and blessed you in the past. It means reading stories of God's faithfulness to others throughout biblical history. It means collecting and reviewing testimonies of God's goodness in the lives of people you know. This is not sentimentality or nostalgia. This is building a foundation of evidence that supports faith's claims about God's character and intentions. When fear tells you that God has forgotten you, faith can respond with specific memories of God's past provision. When fear suggests that your current situation is too difficult for God to handle, faith can remind you of previous impossibilities that God has already resolved. When fear warns that you are alone in your struggles, faith can point to the countless times God has sent help, opened doors, provided resources exactly when you needed them. The fourth discipline is the practice of obedience. Faith grows stronger through exercise, through being acted upon rather than simply thought about. Each time you choose to follow faith's guidance instead of fear's warnings, you strengthen faith's voice in your life. Each time you step out in obedience to what you sense God directing you to do, even when fear is screaming warnings about potential consequences, you train your spirit to trust divine guidance over human anxiety. Obedience does not mean being foolish or irresponsible. Obedience means seeking God's direction through prayer and wise counsel, then following that direction even when it requires you to move beyond your comfort zone. It means having difficult conversations that fear tells you to avoid. It means pursuing opportunities that fear warns are too risky. It means extending forgiveness that fear says is unwise. It means giving generously when fear counsels hoarding. It means loving deeply when fear threatens rejection. Each act of faith-based obedience, regardless of the outcome, strengthens your spiritual capacity to hear and follow divine guidance. You begin to discover that God's wisdom is higher than your wisdom, that God's plans are better than your plans, that stepping out in faith leads to experiences and opportunities and growth that would never be possible if you remained within fear's boundaries. The fifth discipline is the practice of spiritual community. Fear isolates. Fear tells you that no one else would understand your struggles, that sharing your concerns would only burden others, that you must handle your challenges alone. Faith recognizes that you were created for connection, that spiritual battles are fought most effectively in community with other believers who can provide prayer, encouragement, wisdom, and practical support. Spiritual community means surrounding yourself with people who will speak faith into your life when fear is shouting lies. It means having relationships with people who know how to pray effectively, who understand spiritual warfare, who can remind you of truth when anxiety clouds your judgment. It means being part of a church or small group or circle of friends who are also committed to living by faith rather than fear. But spiritual community also means being willing to be vulnerable about your struggles with fear, to admit when you are discouraged or anxious, to ask for prayer and support rather than pretending that you have everything under control. Fear hates this vulnerability because fear thrives in secrecy and shame. When you bring your fears into the light of loving community, you often discover that the fears lose much of their power over you. The sixth discipline is the practice of worship. Worship is not just singing songs or attending religious services, though it can include these activities. Worship is deliberately focusing your attention on God's greatness, God's power, God's love, God's wisdom, God's faithfulness. Worship shifts your perspective from the magnitude of your problems to the magnitude of your God. Fear makes your circumstances appear larger than God. Fear magnifies your problems and minimizes God's ability to address them. Worship reverses this distortion. Worship reminds you that the God who created the universe, who holds galaxies in place, who sustains every living thing, is the same God who is present with you in your current situation. Worship can be as simple as declaring God's goodness out loud when fear is whispering accusations. It can be reading psalms that proclaim God's power and faithfulness. It can be listening to music that lifts your heart toward divine realities. It can be spending time in nature and marveling at the creativity and complexity of God's creation. The specific form is less important than the heart attitude of deliberately turning your attention toward God rather than toward your fears. The seventh discipline is the practice of spiritual warfare. This may sound mysterious or intimidating, but spiritual warfare is simply the active resistance of fear's lies through the declaration of God's truth. When fear tells you that you are not loved, spiritual warfare means declaring out loud that you are deeply loved by God. When fear suggests that your situation is hopeless, spiritual warfare means proclaiming that with God all things are possible. When fear warns that you are not equipped for the challenges you face, spiritual warfare means affirming that God has given you everything you need for life and godliness. Spiritual warfare recognizes that fear is not just a human emotion, but a spiritual force that seeks to undermine your relationship with God and your effectiveness in fulfilling God's purposes for your life. This warfare is fought with truth, with prayer, with scripture, with declarations of faith that directly contradict fear's messages. This might look like starting your day by declaring God's promises over your life before fear has a chance to flood your mind with worries. It might involve memorizing Bible verses that directly address your most common fears, then quoting those verses when anxiety begins to rise. It might mean praying specifically against spirits of fear and anxiety, asking God to fill you with peace and faith instead. Let me give you some specific examples of how these disciplines work together in practical situations. Imagine you are facing a major financial challenge. Fear immediately begins its assault on your mind. Fear reminds you of all your expenses, all your obligations, all the ways this situation could become worse. Fear suggests that you should panic, that you should make desperate decisions, that you should sacrifice your values to solve this problem quickly. Faith, operating through the disciplines we have discussed, responds differently. In the stillness of morning prayer, faith reminds you that God knows your needs before you ask. Through gratitude, faith helps you remember all the ways God has provided for you in the past. Through the study of God's faithfulness, faith recalls biblical promises about God's provision for those who seek first His kingdom. Through obedience, faith might guide you to continue generous giving even in financial pressure, trusting God's economy over fear's calculations. Through spiritual community, faith connects you with people who can provide practical help and spiritual support. Through worship, faith lifts your eyes to the God who owns all resources and cares deeply for your welfare. Through spiritual warfare, faith declares God's promises of provision over fear's predictions of disaster. The result is not that the financial challenge disappears immediately, though it might. The result is that you navigate the challenge from faith rather than fear, which leads to better decisions, greater peace, stronger relationships, and often surprising provisions that fear could never have imagined or engineered. Or consider facing a difficult relationship situation. Fear tells you to protect yourself at all costs, to avoid conflict, to assume the worst about the other person's intentions. Faith, strengthened through spiritual disciplines, suggests a different approach. In stillness, faith helps you hear God's heart for reconciliation and healing. Through gratitude, faith reminds you of the good aspects of this relationship and the blessings that can come from working through difficulties. Through studying God's faithfulness, faith recalls how God has restored other broken relationships in your life. Through obedience, faith might guide you to initiate a difficult but necessary conversation. Through spiritual community, faith provides wise counselors who can help you navigate the situation with wisdom and love. Through worship, faith reminds you that God is able to do more than you can ask or imagine in healing relationships. Through spiritual warfare, faith declares God's power to bring redemption and restoration rather than accepting fear's prediction of permanent damage. Again, the outcome may vary, but your response emerges from faith rather than fear, which honors God, preserves your peace, and creates the best possible conditions for positive resolution. What you are learning right now has the power to transform every area of your life, but only if you remain connected to this teaching and continue growing in spiritual understanding. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the moment. Do not allow the enemy to make you forget what the Spirit is revealing to you through this message. Hit the like button, subscribe, activate the notification bell, and make sure you are here when I release the next video that will build perfectly on everything we have covered today. As you begin to implement these disciplines and strengthen faith's voice in your life, you will start to notice profound changes in how you experience your days. These changes do not happen all at once, but they are cumulative and transformative. The first change you will notice is increased peace. Not the absence of challenges, but a deep calm that remains steady even when circumstances are turbulent. This peace comes from knowing that you are not alone in your struggles, that there is a wisdom guiding you that is higher than your own understanding, that your security rests not in your ability to control outcomes, but in God's faithfulness to His promises. You will find yourself sleeping better because your mind is not racing through endless scenarios of potential problems. You will discover that you can be present with people instead of being distracted by anxious thoughts about future concerns. You will experience a quality of rest and relaxation that was impossible when fear was constantly demanding your mental energy. The second change will be improved decision-making. When fear is driving your choices, you tend to make decisions based on what you want to avoid rather than what you want to pursue. You choose careers, relationships, living situations, and ministry opportunities based primarily on what seems safest rather than what aligns with your calling and gifts. As faith grows stronger, you begin making decisions from a completely different foundation. You consider not just what is safe, but what is faithful. You evaluate options not just based on potential risks, but on potential obedience to God's direction for your life. You find yourself willing to take calculated risks, to pursue challenging opportunities, to step into roles and relationships that require you to depend on God, rather than only on your own abilities. The third change will be deeper relationships. Fear makes you guarded, defensive, careful about how much of yourself you reveal to others. Fear warns that vulnerability leads to rejection, that trust leads to betrayal, that love leads to hurt. While these outcomes are certainly possible, fear's response is to withdraw from relationship altogether, which guarantees loneliness and isolation. Faith enables authentic connection. Faith gives you the courage to be honest about your struggles, your needs, your hopes, your failures. Faith allows you to extend grace to others when they disappoint you, to forgive when you are hurt, to continue investing love even when relationships are difficult or uncertain. As faith grows in your life, you will discover that you are able to love more freely, trust more readily, and serve more generously. Your relationships become deeper and more meaningful because you are no longer primarily focused on protecting yourself from potential pain. The fourth change will be increased effectiveness in your work and ministry. Fear makes you play it safe, avoid challenges, settle for mediocrity rather than risk failure. Fear keeps you in jobs that do not utilize your gifts, in ministries that do not stretch your faith, in roles that do not require you to depend on God's wisdom and strength. Faith propels you toward your calling. Faith gives you the courage to pursue opportunities that match your gifts and passions, even when success is not guaranteed. Faith enables you to take on challenges that are beyond your natural abilities because faith knows that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. You will find yourself volunteering for projects that intimidate you, applying for positions that seem slightly beyond your qualifications, starting ministries or businesses that require divine blessing to succeed. You will discover gifts and abilities you did not know you possessed because you were finally willing to step out of fear's comfort zone and into faith's arena of possibility. The fifth change will be a completely different relationship with uncertainty. Fear demands certainty, predictability, clear outcomes before it is willing to move forward. Since life rarely provides these guarantees, fear keeps you perpetually anxious and paralyzed, always waiting for more information, better circumstances, clearer direction. Faith teaches you to become comfortable with uncertainty, because faith knows that uncertainty is where God does his most beautiful work. Faith helps you understand that if you could manage your life perfectly through your own wisdom and strength, you would have no need for divine intervention, no opportunity to see God's miraculous provision, no chance to develop deeper trust and dependence on your Creator. As faith grows, you will actually begin to prefer some level of uncertainty in your life because you have learned that these are the spaces where you experience God's faithfulness most dramatically. You will find yourself taking on challenges that are slightly beyond what you can handle alone, knowing that this creates opportunity for divine partnership and supernatural assistance. The sixth change will be increased generosity. Fear hoards resources, time, energy, love, assuming that there is never enough to go around. Fear calculates carefully before giving anything away, always holding back reserves for potential future needs. Fear's generosity is conditional, strategic, limited. Faith operates from abundance. Faith recognizes that everything you have is a gift from God, that you are a steward rather than an owner, that blessing increases when it is shared rather than when it is stored. Faith gives freely because faith trusts that God's provision is inexhaustible. You will find yourself becoming more generous with your money, giving beyond what seems prudent because you trust God's promise to supply your needs. You will become more generous with your time, making yourself available to serve others even when your schedule seems full. You will become more generous with your love, extending kindness and compassion without calculating what you might receive in return. This generosity will not diminish your resources, but will actually increase them, because you will discover that God's economy operates very differently than fear's economy. The more you give in faith, the more you receive. The more you serve others, the more opportunities come to you. The more love you extend, the more love flows back into your life. The seventh change will be a profound sense of purpose and meaning in your daily activities. Fear makes life feel burdensome, overwhelming, pointless at times. Fear suggests that your struggles are meaningless, that your efforts make no difference, that your life has no significant impact on anyone else. Faith reveals that every day is filled with divine appointments, that every challenge is an opportunity for spiritual growth, that every act of love and service contributes to God's kingdom purposes. Faith helps you see that your ordinary activities, your regular relationships, your daily choices are all part of a larger story that God is writing through your life. You will begin to approach each day with anticipation rather than dread, curious about how God will use you, what He will teach you, whom He will bring across your path. You will discover meaning in simple activities because you understand that you are partnering with God in His work in the world. Even mundane tasks like work responsibilities, household chores, and routine conversations become opportunities to demonstrate faith, to practice love, to serve others, to grow in character. Your entire life becomes infused with purpose because you recognize that you are living for something infinitely larger and more important than your own comfort and security. The eighth change will be a completely different perspective on suffering and difficulty. Fear presents every problem as evidence that something is wrong, that you are being punished, that life is unfair, and God is distant. Fear makes suffering feel meaningless, purposeless, proof that you are alone in your struggles. Faith understands that difficulty is often the context where the most important spiritual growth occurs. Faith recognizes that challenges develop character, that struggles build spiritual strength, that problems create opportunities for divine intervention and miraculous provision. This does not mean that faith enjoys suffering or seeks out difficulty, but faith interprets hardship through the lens of God's love and sovereignty, rather than through the filter of fear's accusations. Faith asks not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is God doing in this situation, and how can I respond in a way that honors Him?" You will find that difficulties that once devastated you now become catalysts for deeper faith. Challenges that once paralyzed you with fear now motivate you to seek God more earnestly. Problems that once made you feel abandoned by God now become stories of His faithfulness that you can share to encourage others. The ninth change will be supernatural peace in your relationships with others. Fear makes you hypersensitive to criticism, defensive about your weaknesses, competitive with others' successes, jealous of others' blessings. Fear turns every relationship into a potential threat, every interaction into a test of your worth and acceptability. Faith liberates you from the exhausting work of managing others' opinions and controlling their responses to you. Faith reminds you that your identity and security come from God's love, not from human approval. Faith enables you to celebrate others' successes without feeling diminished, to receive criticism without being destroyed, to love others without needing them to love you back in exactly the way you want. This transformation in how you relate to others will revolutionize every relationship in your life. You will become easier to be around because you are no longer needy or defensive. You will become more encouraging to others because you are not competing with them. You will become more forgiving because you understand how much you have been forgiven. The 10th and perhaps most significant change will be an unshakable confidence in God's love for you personally. Fear constantly questions God's goodness, suggests that you are not important enough for divine attention, warns that you might be abandoned in your time of greatest need. Faith, strengthened through the disciplines and experiences we have discussed, develops absolute confidence in God's personal love and commitment to your welfare. This is not presumption or entitlement. This is biblical faith based on God's character and promises. You will reach a point where you know, beyond any doubt, that you are loved by the Creator of the universe with an everlasting love. You will understand that nothing can separate you from this love, not your failures, not your weaknesses, not your circumstances, not other people's rejection. You will rest in the security of knowing that the one who holds all power is completely committed to your ultimate good. This confidence will permeate every area of your life. You will approach each day knowing that you are not alone, that you are not forgotten, that you are not facing your challenges without divine assistance. You will live with the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you are deeply known and unconditionally loved by the only one whose opinion ultimately matters. If this message has transformed something in you, if you now see the battle between fear and faith with new eyes, then you need to take 3 actions before you finish this video. First, hit the like button because that helps me reach more people who are struggling with the same battles you have been fighting. Second, subscribe to this channel if you have not done so, because I am going to continue bringing you deep teachings that will equip you for the spiritual warfare you face every day. And third, share this video. Send it to someone who is trapped in cycles of fear and anxiety, because perhaps you are the instrument God will use to introduce them to the freedom that comes from living by faith rather than fear. As we conclude this exploration of fear's voice and faith's whisper, I want to bring us full circle to where we began. You wake up each morning to the same choice that has faced every human being throughout history. Will you listen to the voice that screams with urgency about everything that could go wrong? Or will you tune your heart to hear the voice that whispers peace about everything that God can make right? This choice is not made once and settled forever. This choice presents itself multiple times throughout each day. When you open your email and see a concerning message, when you look at your bank account balance, when you think about your children's future, when you consider your health, your relationships, your work, your dreams, you will hear both voices offering their competing interpretations of reality. The voice you choose to follow in these moments will determine not just your emotional experience, but the practical direction of your life. Fear will counsel you towards safety, control, and self-protection. Faith will guide you toward trust, surrender, and divine partnership. Fear will make you smaller. Faith will make you larger. Fear will isolate you. Faith will connect you. Fear will paralyze you. Faith will mobilize you. But here is the beautiful truth that should fill you with hope as you continue this journey. Each time you choose faith over fear, you make the next choice easier. Each time you step out in trust rather than pulling back in anxiety, you strengthen your capacity to hear faith's voice more clearly. Each time you experience God's faithfulness in response to your faith, you build evidence that supports future acts of trust. This transformation from fear to faith is not about achieving perfection or never experiencing anxiety again. This is about developing a different default response to life's uncertainties and challenges. This is about training your heart to receive divine communication more readily than anxious speculation. This is about learning to live as a beloved child of God, rather than as an orphan trying to manage an uncertain world through worry and control. The life of faith is not easier than the life of fear, but it is infinitely more beautiful, more meaningful, more peaceful, and more effective. The life of faith involves risks that the life of fear would never take, but these risks lead to rewards that fear could never imagine or achieve. Years from now, when you look back on your life, you will not regret the times you chose faith over fear. You will not wish you had worried more, controlled more, played it safer, held back more love, avoided more risks, trusted less in God's goodness. You will be grateful for every time you heard faith's whisper above fear's scream and chose to follow divine guidance into the unknown spaces where miracles become possible. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up, and both voices begin their familiar appeals for your attention, remember what you have learned today. Remember that you have a choice. Remember that the quiet voice of faith, though harder to hear, offers wisdom that transforms everything about how you experience your life. Choose faith. Choose trust. Choose to believe that the God who created you loves you completely and is actively working all things together for your good. We will meet again in the next video, where we will explore how to develop spiritual discernment that helps you distinguish between divine guidance and human anxiety in real-time situations. Until then, may the peace that passes understanding guard your heart and mind, and may the voice of faith grow stronger in your life each day.